Welcome to the Treasure Chest plugin tutorial for RPG Maker MZ. This plugin lets you create interactive treasure chests with advanced customization and logic options. Let's start by enabling the plugin in our new project. The plugin file is already in the project folder, so all we need to do is select it from the plugin manager and turn it on. After selecting the plugin from the list, we can see a window with its basic configuration options. Let's go through all of them one by one. Open chest mode. This setting determines how the chest's contents will be displayed. You can choose to render the menu as a separate scene or directly on the map. Auto close chest and close delay. These control whether the chest will automatically close when it's empty and how long it waits before closing. We can also enable the Take All button. This lets us assign a keyboard or gamepad key to take all items at once and customize the sound effect for that action. Let's click on the keyboard and gamepad sections. Here we can see that Take All is bound to CTRL for keyboard and X for gamepad. Finally, the gold settings section allows us to change the in-game currency icon and the sound effect that plays when the player collects gold from the chest. In this case, we'll keep the default names. Once we've reviewed all the configuration options, let's click OK to save the settings and proceed. Before working inside the RPG Maker environment, we need to do a bit of preparation. This includes setting up the NUI layout, configuring how our UI will look, and making sure all the graphic assets are added correctly. All graphical elements used in your NUI, backgrounds, frames, item cells, and buttons should be placed inside your project's image/folder, specifically within the plugin subfolder. For example, in our setup, the asset folder contains all chest-related textures, the background of the chest window, slot cell images, and the buttons for closing or taking all items. NUI files define how each part of the interface is rendered. They're regular JSON files that live in the data/directory of your project, typically inside a folder with the plugin's name. You can open them in any text editor. Most plugins come with a few NUI files, each responsible for a different piece of the interface. In our case, there are two: treasure chest and chest item. The first defines the main chest window, the background, the frame, the buttons, and the list area. The second controls the appearance of each individual slot inside the chest, including the item icon, quantity, and selection visuals. Together, they build the full layout: the container treasure chest and its repeating child element chest item. Now let's open the treasure chest layout file and make a small change. Let's modify the visible cells count and the maximum number of columns. These two parameters control how many item slots appear on screen and how they are arranged in rows. Increasing the number of visible cells adds more slots, while changing the column count affects how many appear per line. We've adjusted the parameters and saved the file. Now let's run the game and see the updated chest. Here's the chest screen. We can see that the number of visible cells and columns has changed, matching the new layout settings. Before we start placing the chest, we need to set up the interface resources. Place the NUI preset and all visual assets into the project folders. In our case, these folders are already prepared, but later in the tutorial, we'll go over how to customize the interface and assets in more detail. Let's start by creating a new event on the map. This event will represent your treasure chest. Choose a chest sprite for its appearance. Set the event trigger depending on how you want the chest to react. Use Action button to make the player open it manually. This is the default option. Player touch activates when the player steps onto the chest, while event touch works when the chest itself moves and touches the player. Open the event commands menu and choose plugin command to bring up the treasure chest configuration window. From here, you can set up how the chest behaves and what it contains. From here, select the treasure chest plugin from the list and click OK to confirm. Let's take a closer look at what we have here. First, the background setting. Here we can choose one of the graphical assets we added earlier to the project folder. Just click the field, pick the image you want, hit OK, and our background is ready. Next, we have Remove After Close. If this option is enabled, the chest will be removed from memory once it's opened. This is used for one-time chests, where the loot can only be collected once. Now let's look at the Items section. Click on Items. Here we select the item ID for what the chest will contain. After choosing the ID, make sure to check the Config panel. This is where we fine-tune how the loot behaves. We can set min amount and max amount to make the item quantity vary within a defined range. The amount from variable option is more advanced. It lets you pull the amount dynamically from game variables, and there are condition settings. Condition switch, a simple flag that controls whether the event or plugin action is active. Condition script, a field where you can write an expression, which the game evaluates to decide whether the condition is true or false. Now let's finish setting up the rest of the items and add a bit of variation to how they're used. We'll choose a few different item IDs, maybe a weapon, a potion, and some gold, just to make the chest more interesting. Let's click Apply to save our settings, and then run the game to test what we've built. Once the playtest starts, we'll open our chest and check out its contents, just to make sure everything we configured works exactly as expected. You're all set. We've just built the foundation, creating a basic chest and setting up the core interaction. From here, you already understand how to make the player open a chest and receive items using the treasure chest plugin. In this section, we'll explore 5 practical chest setups that demonstrate different logic and event configurations. Each setup highlights unique gameplay interactions that add depth and creative flexibility for RPG Maker developers. Now let's see the first chest in action. This one is tied directly to quest progress. It delivers rewards only after the player completes a specific task or fulfills certain story conditions. In the event editor, you can use a switch or variable tied to the quest completion to unlock the chest. Once the condition is met, it opens and provides its unique loot or key item. In this example, the chest logic is handled through script calls instead of plugin commands, giving finer control over event behavior. Next, we'll look at a chest that reacts to the player's inventory. This one is linked to whether the player has enough gold, but the same logic can be applied to any specific item or resource. If the required amount isn't available, the chest simply won't contain any items, though you could also implement it so that it stays locked or displays a warning message. Once the player meets the condition, having sufficient gold or the designated item, the chest opens normally, demonstrating how conditional logic can control access to items. Now here's a chest that remembers its state. When the player takes all items, it stays visually open and cannot be looted again. This setup uses self-switches or plugin logic to swap its sprite after the loot is gone, adding a sense of permanence and realism to the scene. Let's move on to a more dynamic example, a chest that generates random loot each time it's opened. Event logic can use random number variables to decide which items appear, making it perfect for replayability, loot tables, or special surprise rewards. It's a simple trick that adds unpredictability to exploration. Here you can see the respawn chance setting. In this case, it's 75%, but it can also be controlled using a variable or a script call. Finally, we have the renewable chest. This one refills its contents over time or after certain conditions are met. For instance, every in-game day it might restock with potions or low-tier loot. This setup shows how you can reuse events dynamically, turning a simple container into a recurring gameplay element for the player. Together, these 5 variations show how flexible treasure chest systems can become when combined with event logic, conditions, and visual states. Each chest tells its own small story, rewarding not just items, but player progression and curiosity.